episode 4 of Obi-Wan Kenobi. It is lit. It is on fire. And I swear every episode of this season, the show just keeps getting better and better. I'm completely enthralled. We're gonna be diving into the most recent episode today, but I have to warn everybody, this is not a spoiler-free review of the show. So, if you want to have a spoiler free review, you need to walk away now because I will not be holding back. We're going to be talking about the entirety of this episode as I go through. So, again, fair warning, spoiler alert. I want to make sure everyone has plenty of time to walk away before we dive in. Give it a few more seconds here. Yeah. So, let's go ahead and dive in here. I've got some show notes we're going to go through. I really love how we get the introduction here, looking back at the previous episode where Obi-Wan basically got his ass handed to him by Darth Vader. And we see him in a bacta tank fading in and out of consciousness at the beginning of this episode. But what I really love about this sequence is they're flashing back to him and Anakin, both in a bacta tank at the same time, both with burns on their body. And so there's this connection with them as Obi-Wan is like in this meditative trance, unconscious from the pain. And then he's feeling the connection between him and Vader and all that. And then all of a sudden he snaps out of it and he's like, oh, where am I? Comes out and he's panicking, right? And then he feels this moment of, oh, where am I? And then, oh, where's Leia? And that's when we get the sequence where apparently, and this is where I wasn't sure what was going to happen at the end of the last episode, where Leia has definitely been captured by Reva, and we see her stuck in this room on Mustafar with stormtroopers, and she's being questioned by them. And this little actress, man, is so awesome. She's like demanding that they release her because I'm a princess of Alderaan, and my father's a powerful sinner. Just intense. And the Reva comes in and she's like, "Oh, you're so cute." But I do admit that this scene did feel a little weak, because there's this sequence where Leia's like, "He'll come for me," and we get that in a lot of different films and shows, so that it felt a little weak here. But it's all good. Reva then claims Obi-Wan is dead and no one's coming for her, um, which begs the question, does Reva actually know that he's dead? Or does she think that he's dead? Or is she just using that as a ploy? Because I think everyone realizes Obi-Wan escaped, but maybe Reva did. I don't know. Anyway, we then get flash forward. We're going back to Obi-Wan, and he's on the planet with Tala, I think is her name, and the Resistance, and basically telling the Resistance leader. And this is another point where I feel we could get a glimpse of the arrogance of Obi-Wan a little bit, where the resistance leader doesn't want to help because he doesn't want his people to suffer. And Obi-Wan makes this. I almost said Aragorn. I'm so into the Lord of the Rings right now. Obi-Wan makes this statement about, you have no idea what the Empire is capable of, which sounds really arrogant given the fact that for the past 10 years, everyone has been suffering under the Empire while he's been off in hiding on, Tatooine watching over Luke. And thankfully, the scene is strong enough that the writers have the rebel leader rebutting with, you know what? I had a wife once, and she was a Jedi. I know exactly what the Empire is capable of because the Inquisitors came for her. Which is really cool because it does lend some credence to this scene here, and it's not just Obi-Wan being a dick and being like, you don't know what the Empire is capable of. Yeah, everybody does, dude. Like, they've all been suffering. Um, we then, go to this sequence where they've got a little bit of data and they're looking at this holocron of Mustafar and Darth Vader's fortress. And this is when we get the first glimpse of the fact that no one really knows anything about the fortress, really. They just know it's there, but they don't really have a lot of data on it. And this is when we get the glimpse of the Obi-Wan of old when he says, I won't leave Leia there, and I'll go alone if I must. Which, it's a glimmer, it's a spark of who he used to be. And I feel like this is where we're starting to see, some of the complaints that people have had about, Obi-Wan would have been able to completely destroy those stormtroopers in the previous episode, and I don't understand why he didn't just use the force and mind wipe them and all this other stuff. He's a broken man at this point, and we do get a glimpse of that here in the next sequence because even though he's feeling himself and the bravado is coming back, the next sequence is him on a ship and he's struggling to even move this small object across the table, which looks like a communicator, a comm device or something, which goes back to the episode when Leia was falling. And you remember, like, it took him several moments to even connect with the Force because he'd been cut off for the past 10 years to the point where he can't even feel the Force anymore. So this is really cool that we're starting to see him reconnect with the Force, but obviously we're getting the fact that he's weak. This is not the Obi-Wan of old. This is the Obi-Wan of today, and the Obi-Wan of today is barely able to connect with the Force at all. So, good glimpse here in the ship. Next up, let's see here. I'm going through my show notes. Uh, he's a broken man at this point. His body isn't the only thing that needs to heal, and this is what Tala reminds him of here: is that, hey man, like you are not the man you once were. Just give it time. Now, here is a sequence that gives me the old Star Wars like vibes from the original films. Because Tala is like, I've got my old clearance. I can break into Mustafar, and once I get in there, I can get you in, and we can go through the database, and we'll find out where she is. And it's kind of like the old, it's an older code, sir, but it checks out sequence that we get from Return of the Jedi, as she sneaks in, and of course then Obi-Wan gets into the base. Go back to Leia. We've got Reva attempting to use mind control on Leia, and Leia responds with, is this a staring contest? And I think this is the first glimpse that we're going to get that Leia is actually force sensitive, which is something that, during the original trilogy, that wasn't really, it wasn't a big deal. And obviously, with all the extended universe stuff, which I think is called Legacy now or something, I don't really even know all the terminology. And then with the newer Skywalker Saga films from Disney, we realized that Leia was force sensitive. We just get a glimpse of that in Empire Strikes Back. There is another. Um, but here we see that she is force sensitive and that she is at the very least capable of resisting Reva's mind control, which for a kid that's pretty impressive. But it does give a glimpse for what the canon is now dictating for the character of Princess Leia, um, which is very cool. I'm always curious who might be doing a cameo under the Stormtrooper masks because we constantly see, whether it's in the films or in uh, the shows like Mandalorian or Book of Boba Fett, so on and so forth, different people like to do cameos in Stormtrooper. So anytime I see a Stormtrooper now in a sequence that has, like extended Stormtrooper scenes, I'm always like, is this a cameo or is it not a cameo? But I think in this case, we get this sequence where Obi-Wan Kenobi is hiding in a tunnel and there's some Stormtroopers coming by and we get the moment where finally he's starting to come out of his shell. He's remembering who he was. He's feeling himself, and he uses the Force and causes a distraction. And the stormtroopers walk away, which is it's a tease of what's about to come. Because this is where I said where the previous episode was turned up to 11, this episode's turned up to 12. Like it just keeps going up a notch every single episode. Um, I have questions about this next scene. I have a lot of questions. So Obi-Wan enters this hallway, right? And he's talking with Tall on the mic, and he's like, "I don't think this is a fortress. I think it's a tomb." And we have a hallway lined with corpses. Who are these corpses? I know that at least one of them is a Jedi because we get to the end and you're like, "Oh, cringe," because there's a youngling, literally there's a youngling in this, like they're like frozen, it's like they're in these encasement tombs and they've all got looks of shock and surprise on their face, right? So it's almost like Darth Vader, it's almost like Anakin Skywalker is keeping these as trophies of some kind, but are they all Jedi? Because they're all wearing different clothing and I don't really know what this is supposed to be. If it's just the corpses of the Jedi that he's been hunting, that kind of makes sense, but is there something else going on here? Because there's no context for what this scene is. So um, I have lots of thoughts. If anybody has any answers to that, I'd love to hear it down in the comments below. This is also a great moment for me to say, hey, if you like this episode, if you like this series that I'm doing, reviewing these episodes, and you want to see more, do me a solid. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so that you can continue to get updates as I review Star Wars, Star Trek, Rings of Power, Wheel of Time, all these other shows that I like to watch, The Boys, so on and so forth. And of course, if you want to support the channel, you can always do so by dropping a super thanks on any of my videos $2, $3, $5, $10, whatever you want. It's a great way to support your favorite content creators out there, whether it's me or other people. You can also join as a member of the Adventurers Guild down below. That's our membership option here on YouTube, and there's a lot of cool perks to that. I also stream every single day. We have a gaming community and a Discord. Links are down below, and I'm a writer and a game developer on that world behind me in that world map. It's the world of Weave in the Void, which is a 5th edition tabletop setting with my brother and my wife. There is a point and click game associated with that, and of course, a book series all being done through our Patreon, so check that out. But I digress. Let's get back into spoiler territory. Um, the youngling threw me for a loop. I really had to pause and just contemplate what's going on with this hallway. The youngling, I understand that's definitely a Jedi, but are the rest Jedi? I guess we'll find out more. Leia's now in this torture chamber, and of course panicking, and we finally get a distraction from Tala in the sense that she calls Riva out and basically gives up the path. But it's kind of like it feels like the sequence from A New Hope when Leia's being interrogated and she's like, Dantooine, they're on Dantooine. And Riva kind of senses that something's going on here and she's like, are you lying to me or are you telling the truth? You could be a spy, but maybe you aren't a spy, but she can't quite suss it out, but she's obviously suspicious. And then, of course, Obi-Wan gets caught by one of the seeker droids as he's trying to get Leia out, and the alarm goes off. And this is when shit hits the fan, ladies and gentlemen, in a good way also, because we get the Obi-Wan classic. The power goes out, and for the first time we see him lightsaber out, taking out a couple of stormtroopers, and then he's on the run. Actually, that happened before the seeker droid. Anyway, seeker droid sees them. Now the alarms are going off. Everyone's swarming, and this is where we start to really get a glimpse of Obi-Wan starting to feel himself again. This sequence was so epic because Obi-Wan's he's just there's stormtroopers coming out of every corner and he's blocking blaster bolts, and he's you can the music is like ramping up, and he's getting more and more sure of himself because the force he's connected to the force again for the first time in a decade, and you can see it in his face, and he's like, "Ugh," and he's just deflecting blaster bolts and moving them around and forcing them back, and all this cool stuff. It reminds me of the prequel trilogies when Obi-Wan is at his prime and he's constantly out there as this badass general, and we see, there's this sequence in these hallways. Stormtroopers are coming after him, and he is almost. It's like he's back in his prime, and he feels it. He feels it. And then there's this sequence where a blaster bolt goes awry and the water's going to come through the chamber, and he holds it off long enough for Tala and Leia to escape, and then he pushes it towards the stormtroopers and manages to escape as the water comes caving in. And you could it's just so cool. Like, it's so cool to have Obi-Wan like feeling himself, like he's back to his, at least for a moment, he had the connection with the Force again for the first time in a decade. And it was just, this is the coolest sequence I've seen in the series so far. Hands down, the coolest sequence I've seen is this is just so cool. Um, they get on the loading dock. And some stuff happens. The rebels come in that he was working with a couple of snow speeders. They manage to escape right at the last minute. There's a couple of other of the Inquisitors here. Obviously, they get away, and the next sequence is Darth Vader force choking the shit out of Reva, and basically, I told you what failure would bring. And then she manages to gasp out, I let them get away. I stuck a tracker on their ship. And this is another weak moment where I'm like, that's been done before. That's like an overdone trope from this series, but okay. At first, I wasn't sure if she was just lying to save her butt, but as we got to the end of the episode, we saw that yeah, the tracker is in the little droid that Leia has, which is again kind of a trope, but it's there. And as the scene ends, and as we get to the end of the episode, Luke and Leia are, or not Luke and Leia, Leia and Obi-Wan are sharing this connection, and it kind of brought home to me that this is that connection which kind of builds some credence and credibility for that sequence at the beginning of New Hope when Leia is, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope. Um, I think this helps establish that she did have a connection with Obi-Wan that Luke didn't have, and they're kind of fleshing that backstory out a little bit more here with this series in a way that I hadn't considered before, which ultimately is really, really cool, and I think is only helping to make the show even better. Now, the rumors are that they might already be looking at a season two. I don't know. This was meant as a limited series run with a very tight storyline. I'm interested to see where this is going to go. We're obviously down to the last two episodes now. 10 out of 10. I love this episode. Hopefully you loved it as well. If you did, drop your comments down below. Can't wait to watch the next episode with everyone. Don't forget to like, comment, drop a super thanks, join our Discord. See everybody in the next episode. Until then, may the force be with you, everybody.